As many of you know, I'm an environmentalist and a long-time climate organizer and activist, so I love our Unitarian Universalist principle about the interdependent web of all existence. I love that beautiful vision of the web that connects us all, of shiny, translucent pieces, drawing heart to heart and breath to breath, weaving my being in with the geese and the trees and the warm brown earth. I love knowing that I'm a part of this starry, magical universe, the cosmos embedded in my bones, and all of life moving in and out of my lungs in a carbon beat. A few years ago, I was in a theological conversation among UU ministers where we were talking about the web of life as a metaphor for human relationships and what happens when there is a spider in the web. I found very quickly that when I saw myself as the spider, as a person with a lot of power in a situation, I felt really great about the web. But when I saw myself as a fly, stuck in a web with a spider, I did not like that situation at all. This life, this world that we're living in, it includes death, and it includes predators, and it includes all of us, and by that I mean not just humans, eating things. Which is great when you're hungry and you have a delicious meal in front of you, and it's absolutely terrifying if you're on the menu. Now, I'm not here to fix that or to explain it away. It's true, it's part of the world. And I do want to put a little note here, a caveat that the metaphor breaks down when you fully apply it to human relationships. It is certainly possible and in fact required for us to live without eating each other. It's even possible for us to live without harming each other. There's actually enough food and water and energy on this earth to sustain all of human life if we would just be willing to share our resources equitably. But my friends, that is a different sermon. This sermon is about the reality that death is embedded in this life of ours, even when we are in the web as apex predators. So what does that reality mean for our Unitarian Universalist values of honoring life, as well as honoring the interdependent web of all existence? What does it mean for our supposition that love is at the center of how we choose to live? How do we live our values in this web? Arctic peoples in what we now call Alaska have been hunting whales for 12 to 1400 years. When subsistence whaling began, it changed the human ecosystem in the Arctic. For the first time, a single kill could feed an entire community. Permanent villages developed in places where whales consistently came near to shore. Whale hunters gained stature in those communities, and a culture of reverence for both the hunt and the whales developed. Oral histories and contemporary culture of the Inuit and Yupik people in Alaska explain that humans and whales have a reciprocal relationship of respect. The whales communicate with the whaling people, and their relationship is one of honor and reverence. The Inupiat people carve whaling amulets called iktugat, which are designed to attract whales to a whaling boat. These iktugat are beautifully carved pieces that mirror the whale's image, and they are placed into whaling boats face down towards the animals, not towards the people, face down to honor the whales. The art is created for the whales, not for the people. In an article for the Smithsonian, author Krista Langlois writes, quote, "Yupik stories from St. Lawrence Island tell of whales who might spend an hour swimming directly underneath an umiak, which is a traditional whaling boat, positioning themselves so they can check out the carvings and the men who are occupying the boat. If the umiak is clean and the carvings beautiful and the men respectful, then the whale might reposition itself to be harpooned. If the art portrayed the whale in an unflattering light, or if the boat was dirty, it indicated that the hunters were lazy and they would not treat the whale's body properly, and then the whale might swim away." Langlois goes on to quote, "In Sounding a Sea Change, Acoustic Ecology and Arctic Ocean Governance," published in Thinking with Water, when they quote Point Hope, Alaska resident Kirk Oviek. Kirk says, "Like my aunt said, the whales have ears, and they are more like people. The first batch of whales would show up to check out which ones in a whaling crew would be more hospitable. And then the whales would return to their pack and tell the rest of the whales about the situation." The Inupiat and Yupik people believe that whales could choose to give themselves to human beings that were respectful and honored the whale and its life, and would treat that whale in a respectful way in its death. The Yupik people believe that the whales, in fact, used to live on land, and that they long to return to the land, and they will choose to give themselves to hunters who will appropriately honor their bones and complete a ritual that will let their spirit return to the land. This reciprocal relationship of honor and reverence and communication is very different than a capitalist understanding of other beings as objects or raw materials or simply things for human beings to use and consume. Now, this alternative worldview does not eliminate eating to live, but it puts hunting in a place of reverence, recognizing the sacredness of the life that one takes, and therefore doing it in a sacred way that honors that life. It's just a dramatically different approach than a factory farm or than the commercial whaling that decimated whale populations. Those kinds of systems are killing machines that are part of a death culture that destroys wantonly as though life were meaningless. Death is part of life. Yes, that's true. But death can be in a creative, intertwined relationship with life, or it can be a reckless tool of wanton destruction. Death is part of life, but cruelty and needless, meaningless excess death need not be. As Unitarian Universalists, our work is to honor life, to honor the sacredness of life. It is not to eliminate death, because we can't do that. We work to understand the reality of the cycle of life and to honor life and death in this reciprocal relationship with reverence and respect throughout the life cycle. We work to reduce suffering and to hold life and death in love. In the 2000s, I saw a drag performer who was queering the binary and talking about life and death. Now, I wish I could remember her name because her performances stayed with me and in my head and heart all of these years, but despite much searching, I have not found her. In the performance, she was talking about life and death not as binary opposites, but instead as twins. She said, "Sometimes I get confused and I mix them up, you know? They look so much alike. I'd be like, which one are you again? Oh, right, you're death. You have that little mole on your face." Death and life are not opposites, but they are siblings. They feed into one another. They sustain each other. And when I say death is a part of life, it's a reality. I mean death feeds life. It feeds the earth, and it feeds all of us. It is the ground, it is the subsistence and the foundation of life. Death is creative, and it is built into the living world, not as its end, but as intrinsic to its being. This is true for all of life, not just for us apex predators or carnivores. Death is fundamental to the health of all vegetation and of all life on Earth. The decay of organic material feeds the soil that we need in order to have any food at all. Compost puts the nutrients of organic matter back into the ground, where they are then taken up by other plants that bring them back into the life cycle again, either through being eaten by animals, including humans, or through dying and then returning themselves to the soil and to the cycle of life again. As a bonus, healthier soil doesn't just feed us, it also captures and stores carbon. But that's another sermon too. We'll talk about that next week. The process of death feeding life and life feeding death again is maybe a little gross, but it's also true. They are twins that go back and forth in an interwoven cycle. The poet and essayist Danusha Lamaris wrote this poem, "Feeding the Worms." Ever since I found out that earthworms have taste buds all over the delicate pink strings of their bodies, I pause, dropping apple peels into the compost bin. Imagine the dark, writhing ecstasy, the sweetness of the apples permeating their pores. I offer beets and parsley, avocado and melon, the feathery tops of carrots. I'd always thought theirs was a menial life, eyeless and hidden, almost vulgar, though now it seems they bear a pleasure so sublime, so decadent. I want to contribute however I can, forgetting a moment, my place on the menu. Life and death are twins. They are two halves of the same figure eight, the infinite relationship of birth and growth and nurture and loss and death and time. Life would not exist without death. Death feeds all of us, yes, through meat, but also through harvest and through compost, through that rich, fecund fertility of the worms and the soil. It is kind of disgusting, but it's also kind of beautiful, and it's fundamentally a circle. Death creates life, and every single time life creates death. For we are mortals, my dear ones. That is part of the deal of getting to walk around in these gorgeous, fleshy bodies, of getting to love and feel the brush of sun and air and skin. We are here, now, just for a moment, because someone gave birth to us and because many, many, many have died before us. Who knows if I give my body to the whales or to the earth, what will become of me, but I do know that I'm here now, and everyone I've ever loved and lost has been a blessing in my life, despite and also because of their mortality. Facing the loss and the grief helps us appreciate what is true. Life is unbelievably precious, and death is part of it, woven together back and forth like lovers in a twinning we cannot separate. Death and life are like the cycles of the seasons. Winter bursting into spring, bursting into the life of the summer, and all the way back around to winter again. Death creates life, and life creates death, and here we are in between the two, living in this moment and eventually dying, which will create more living, and on in the infinite dance. Amen.